Hey everybody, I'm Carson Grubaugh.
Hi, I'm Sean Robinson. How you doing today, Carson?
I'm doing good. Tell us about this book we got here, Sean.
Oh my gosh, I have been waiting for this for a long time, and not necessarily for the reasons you might think. This is the first volume of a excellent reprint of Fist of the North Star. This is a classic, one of the biggest books in young men's comics from the early 1980s. I believe the first uh, installment of this was 1983, and this ran weekly, a weekly comic, Carson, for 5 years, a fairly stunning achievement for a weekly comic, and it's a real classic, and it was made into a television show and also a OVA, original video animation. I think a live action movie at some point, and that's where I first encountered it was the television show. Um, Somebody I knew had a VHS copy of this, and it was basically the most horrifying thing I'd ever seen when I was 12 years old.
Also the
So the
coolest, I'm
right,
assuming.
yeah, simultaneously the most horrifying and the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And it follows a warrior with a very particular skill set who is wandering in a post-apocalyptic landscape sometime in the future, the 1990s.
Yeah, which seems to be, I think the main reason I wanted to look at this. I've seen I've looked at this online and I probably read about as much as this first volume contains, and I thought, kind of dumb. And like when we were talking about Berserk, my initial impression of Berserk was like another Fist of the North Star where he just fights bigger and badder guys. But I do know that the art is so cool, and now that it's like in a nice print, it's like, well, I just want that to flip through it, is why I grabbed it. But also because we were looking at Berserk, I know this is a precedent for that, and so I
Right.
think it'd be
Well,
fun
it's
to
a
explore.
yeah, well, it's a precedent for so many things. It's funny how like a cliche like that, the bigger, badder opponent. I mean, it had to start somewhere, you know. And essentially, like it started with books like Fist of the North Star and Dragon Ball, which spun off into Dragon Ball Z. Very different, by the way. Those two, the progression of Dragon Ball is fairly insane.
I
From
know
a
Tori's kid Jack has been watching the Dragon Ball Z, and I get what you guys were joking about when we were talking to Brandon, where it's like, oh my god, it's just Super Saiyan and Super Saiyan Blue, and like I can't even listen to him.
what you have what the classic comedy manga, even a monkey can draw manga, called villain inflation. And
Yeah.
basically, like they say something along the lines of eventually you're going to have to be fighting a nebulous force because every time you inflate the size of the threat, and if your book is successful, you keep on going, and eventually the threat has to be world destroying. But this is the origins of that type of
And
conflict
is that how
increase.
this goes, or is it like Berserk where a story starts to develop eventually?
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't read all of Berserk, but I think that this is where they're fairly similar in the sense that the inflation, comes along with thematic nuance and things like that, and
Okay.
at least from what I'm aware of, some of the characters who we meet in this first volume as children, for instance, become adults and assist in some of these later conflicts. Uh,
Okay.
so the I think it's fairly extraordinary from a visual standpoint. Um,
Yeah, which is why I wanted to get it. And I'm learning that I have to have more patience sometimes with letting a
mhm.
story develop. Especially like now having read the second volume of Berserk. Like the first volume I would have been like, okay, it's episodic monster of the week stuff.
Right.
But even thinking about Dave's advice, like get in and start telling a story one at a time and then let
Yeah.
the bigger story build. I got to have more patience. So I'm excited about this book.
Yeah.
Uh,
Serialization is a really interesting thing, and it's worth remembering when you're reading the beginning chapters of something like this that it's not like all 25 volumes existed at the same time. Somebody didn't know they were going to have 4,000 pages to tell a story. As far as they knew, I mean, they might have been canceled after a couple a couple weeks. I know that in this case they had a sort of trial, uh, few a few short stories essentially that were like trial balloons for this larger one. I think they might have been under contract for 2 or 3 years or something. But the I, the sort of pressure cooker that somebody can be under with serialization is a very interesting kind of thing. And I think you see some of the sort of reader response polls and stuff like that that the Japanese magazines were known for at the time. You see the results of that here, where they sort of hone and refine the thing that they're doing until it's sort of all encompassing, and you get this like very very focused story. Should we do a flip through now?
Yeah, yeah. We'll start
What,
on the cover, which we
will you
both.
switch? Are you switching so that your camera's?
Oh, can you not see the?
Oh, I just didn't know if you were if you're recording that separately, so we can have that be full screen.
Yeah, yeah. I'll
Okay,
I'll
great.
have that. Yeah,
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. But the cover. I'm sorry.
I can do full screen. Oh, but we both needed to. I gotta flip back to my camera because we both wanted to try and make that neck with our mouths closed. So.
The thing I can't quite get is he's got these pouty lips, which I have the pouty lips. I can do the pouty
while
lips.
your neck is flared.
Right. I get this kind of turtle thing happening. I can't quite.
Yeah.
Obviously, the pecs.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's an impressive. I have when we switch over to a screen share, I have a good image of that. So the cover is like, it cracks me up.
Here's the face.
Yeah. But I don't know how you do that. Like, I don't know where this is. This what I know. This is the sternocleidomastoid mastoid here.
Yeah.
But what is this one? Like, where?
He's got special techniques, man.
Yeah, is that I don't know. So that cover cracked me up.
It's great.
And then I made some notes about timeline too, because when I'm thinking, okay, they're like running around looking for water, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking Mad Max, which was 1979.
Right. And then Mad Max 2, it hit in 81, I think. And I think that's probably the primary influence here.
And then Akira is 82, and this is 83.
Yep.
So we're in 1990 something, and the world is engulfed in nuclear fire.
Doesn't Akira take place during the 2020 Tokyo Olympics?
I don't remember the time.
Yeah, it's bold to be working just a few years in advance. But look at the airbrush work on this first color page here. So we actually get the color reproduction instead of a grayscale,
And I was wondering about that on this. This looks computer done to me. There's like this weird texture in here. I don't know. A lot of this looks like maybe they went and redid it based on this looks airbrushed to me, but this looks like they took that airbrush and redid it on the computer.
Yeah, possibly. Or that texture is like they got some toothy paper, and that's a what do you call color pencil applique on top of the airbrush work.
It's cool. It's really sleek. I mean, it looks like what sophisticated computer coloring does, not like the wet work stuff that we were looking at last night.
Yeah, the thing that I wanted to say here is when I was just flipping through the volume before I'd even read the first section in color, I was joking with you. I was texting with you, and I texted you something about the badass airbrushing on the side of a van, and how the aesthetic of this really was just like distilled early 80s, like metal, leather jacket, fist in the air, fuck the police.
Airbrush art, a hawk and an eagle.
Exactly. And there it is. There's the airbrush right there on the first color pages, and is really, it really is just like dive right into it, like commit 100% to the aesthetic.
Yeah, and that's my total opinion of the book, is like, it is cool 80s, like shit that a kid would be like, hell yeah, WWF, Mohawks, shoulder pad, and I can see a lot of the image like Rob Liefeld, shoulder pads and spikes, and like it. This is the precedent for all the cross hatching and everything into the night, like Z666. Yeah.
Can you imagine if you had been able to read this when you were, 11 or 12 years old, if you could have bought this on a newsstand?
Oh, at the time it was coming out, like in the
Yeah.
80s, yeah, I would have
Yeah.
been going nuts. And like the whole, I mean, this whole post-apocalyptic thing, like, of course the world is engulfed in nuclear fire. Like,
Right.
I mean, I get it. I don't know that it holds up well, but it's fun and it looks cool, so I like it.
Yeah. Well, it was an actual threat of nuclear annihilation then. I mean, not that it can't happen now, but I know
But
we're
you see
really.
that in so many of those stories. You see it in Akira, you see it in Appleseed.
Mhm.
Like, that is all these stories coming out of the 80s are kind of derived from that fear, and then Japan having, I think, the most direct experience with that.
Right.
Of course
Having
they're
actually endured
obsessed.
nuclear attacks, yeah.
Yeah, of course they're obsessed with that.
So you notice in the action sequences here, everyone is exploding, and that is because the central conceit here of the action is that basically the main character, who we're going to talk about, Kenshiro, who's referred to as Ken most of the time in this translation, can attack the prime meridian points, basically like Chinese acupressure techniques. He uses like Chinese acupressure techniques to cause his opponents to explode.
Which is also like so late 70s, 1980s kung fu movie, like the One Punch Kill
Right.
and all of that kind of, I don't know, mythology about martial arts that was around when we were growing up. Like, you get those martial arts magazines and you could order nunchucks. And do you remember those
I
things?
do, yeah.
And then that all eventually leveled up to, well, and it was always like the kumite and like trying to decide whose style was the best. And then that leveled up into the real world with the mixed martial arts and the UFC. And
Right.
it's just funny how once it became, since I follow that stuff really closely, it's funny to see as that's all actually been put to the test, you realize, well, there is no like one punch blow like it. And even if you knock someone out, like, I mean, I've seen guys get knocked out, and almost always they come back after a couple seconds. If a guy's out for like a minute, it's like a really big, oh shit, we killed somebody maybe. But like the kung fu movie where you punch someone once and they go down, or I don't know. I just think it's all funny in retrospect because we've seen that be a bunch of hook 'em now.
But it's fairly amazing that the early chapters are so consistent with the later ones. He's got the technique going right from the start. So this artwork is by Tetsuo Hara in his studio, obviously on a weekly schedule. The studio is doing a lot.
Which is nuts.
Right. The story is by Baronson, and the editor, who was their editor on the book, credits himself with the afterword with coming up with the idea for thinking of the connection with Chinese acupressure. Basically giving himself the credit for the major hook. And apparently the editor had already been working with Tetsuo Hara on the sort of precursor to this, and then brought in the scripter as a late addition. And the artwork is pretty extraordinary. We were talking about durability in one of these chapters. You'll notice this is a fairly durable artwork. You got a nice combination of the thick contour lines. And I mean, it's got to be brush, right?
Yeah, it looks like brush to me.
These
when I was thinking about doing a recreation, I was kind of thinking, okay, I got to use a brush and then switch over to a pen. So yeah, it looks like.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful. It still looks good, and you
Yeah,
can see the influence it had. And the print is really nice. You had a couple pages you tagged where the print quality wasn't as good, but like this book you know, this
Looks
looks
great.
nice and clean. Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
why I wanted it. It's just fun to look at.
Yeah, it's
Um,
this is definitely scanned from the original negative. You might wonder how I can, how I can tell something like that. Um, it, there are certain hallmarks to the actual quality of the reproduction that indicate to me, well, basically, like if this would have been a tremendous production if they had gone back to the original artwork. And there's some indications to me this is from the negative and not the original artwork. And they would have had to adjust all of the screen tone, which is shrunken over time and things like that.
Maybe we can look at the ones that I did scan, and if you see any of that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, this is
Um,
definitely from the original negative, and it's very very impressive, and gives people an idea. Sometimes people sort of look down on earlier photographic reproduction as if it's like inferior to the stuff these days, and you get an idea of why it's so important to keep those photo assets around when you see how great this book looks and how shitty the early digital reproduction looked.
yeah, or even some of like the later pages in this book that we have tagged that are
Right.
just a
Not
little bit thicker and more gummed up.
right.
So one thing I tagged here, this is, I don't know, I don't think there's a lot to talk about in this book other than like, cool, it's, most of the
Yeah.
pages I tagged are just things I thought were funny. But I do like this technique that he uses all throughout this scene where Ken, and this got to be pre uh, Street Fighter as well. So
Oh,
is that a
Street
precedent
Fighter
for,
is definitely an adaptation of this, a backdoor adaptation.
okay, with
Yeah,
the
so
Ken, yeah,
so Ken in Japanese means fist,
okay.
which is pretty badass. So and Shiro is like white. I thought it was like new or something, but anyway, so essentially the guy's full name means like white fist.
White Fist, okay.
Um and
But he's in jail, and throughout this whole scene, they want to show the faces, so they just like it looks like his head's sticking out of the bars, or the bars are crumbling, but really they're just, I like that little thing they're doing to not draw the bars in front, and it works pretty well. Like you read throughout that scene, like you understand what they're doing. Um, like when her face shows up here,
right.
his face is showing through. I thought that was an interesting solution that I would never have come to. That was maybe like the most formally interesting thing to me in the book.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, otherwise it's all just big cool muscles, which is fine. Motorcycle. Look at all those motorcycles. Uh, so
The
I don't know.
fleet.
Unless there's a bunch of stuff that you really feel like you need to talk about.
No, it's got a lot of the things that are really like standard later. His the sort of main villain in this particular piece is a sexually omnivorous, uh, you know, sort of pretty boy, which is another thing that was a sort of standard. He's got sort of follow on hanger-ons who he accumulates. Um, who exhibit different characteristics that are sort of standard action fare after this point, like the weak follower on who is essentially like an acolyte to the hero. He's got a mysterious past that is revealed in his conflicts with the bad guys.
I definitely noticed some of like this, the basic story arc here is pretty much the same story arc of the first volume of Berserk as
Right.
well. Like a little bit of a fight, you get the hanger on. He goes, he has a couple battles. Here we're into volume 2 now with the single color reproduction.
Yeah, this is great. This is a two color section here, and you can tell again, from the original artwork or the original negative. I would guess straight from the original negative, and they actually kept it so that they were able to reproduce it in the same way with the Pantone. And you can see some airbrush techniques for the second color. And it's funny, you almost never see this reproduced in a reprint, but they had the means and to do it, and you can see how fantastic it looks. It's a real nice contrast with the previous section. I love that Buddha statue broken in half on that spread.
On this, wait, on the color section.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I like this one with
yeah.
him jumping off here.
Yeah, that's great. Sorry, that's a later one. It's chapter 8, Flames of Devotion.
Oh,
Has the
okay.
two color again and has the Buddha. And really stylishly designed. We talked a little bit before about that sort of animation technique to the design where basically you can tell somebody apart from their silhouette. That's a fairly good, satisfying like metric for if you design somebody that the design itself is durable. And you can notice that Ken is like clearly different from everybody else. All the bad
Yeah.
guys that he fights have a different silhouette. They're all different size and scale and proportion.
Here's a good page here. They all look like juggalos. This is WWF too, right? I guess now
Yeah.
it's WWE.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the time, WWF, yeah. I've always thought about the WWF as a sort of distillation of the things that young men are interested in the same way that like romance novels can be like distillations of the things that young women or middle-aged women are interested in. And this is sort of an extreme example of that.
Yeah. But I like that. I like that it's all in on it.
Oh yeah, it's committed. That's the thing. It's like, do you want to watch some lame ass wrestling where it's like trying to be cool the whole time, or do you want to watch somebody the real peak of the WWF stuff where the guys were totally aware of what they were doing and like committed to it and every 100% of it.
And this spread here I think gets to that too, because I tagged this one as having a slapstick element I liked, where the guy is swinging around this big rod and he's trying to hit Ken and he misses and he basically demolishes a couple of his compatriots there. Like I think it's self-aware enough to have those moments of like humor in it. Like there's not many, but I think there is kind of underneath.
Yeah,
it is chuckling at itself a little bit. It's hard to tell though, like some of these designs, I don't know. I don't know how seriously it takes itself or not.
Well, I mean, these are comics that are made to be read by the 14 to 20-year-old, but then they're being made by 24 or 25-year-olds, So you have to think that there's a certain level of awareness to it.
And then this, here's
yeah.
This is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some of the sort of destruction scenes were a little bit disappointing to me from a environmental standpoint, but that's one of the panels that really gives it to you.
Well, and compared to like Akira or what we were looking at in Appleseed, yeah. And then you saw this chapter 9.
Right.
And people who have the book, I guess, I didn't scan this ahead of time. I don't know if I have any of the things I scanned are from this chapter, but
yeah, most of chapter 9 is not from the original negative. It looks to me like it's at least a generation down and it's filled in. And you get an idea what it really would have looked like in the original serialization. And you also get an idea why it's really important for these artists or their studios or their publishers to preserve the actual physical negative. Because, I mean, if the whole book looked like this, I mean, I can tell you and I wouldn't be talking about it.
No, I wouldn't be buying it. I probably, when I read it online, it was probably people scanning and like fans were scanning the original printings and translating them or something. So it probably looked like that. And I thought it looks cool. And I'm realizing now that I'm buying physical books again, there are different reasons that I buy books. Like when I read it all digital, it has to be actually like I want to read it. When I'm buying the physical book, it's enough for me to just like enjoy the art and pick it up and flip through it, and then I'm more likely to sit there and read it. So this is one I definitely had started to read and just thought this story was kind of silly, which it is, but I really enjoy it a lot more when I look at it. But yeah, if it was all printed like this page here, I wouldn't be as interested in buying it because it's just not actually showing me the art. That's a badass pick. Chapter 10. That's your Mad Max right there.
Yep. When a great star falls. So there's some plot line stuff here that's fairly interesting, where he's got his his lover from before, who's been imprisoned by his. Once again, this is a fairly now fairly standard stuff, but this is where the cliche comes from.
Well, and I picked up. We'll switch over to the screen now because I don't have any more pages tagged. But this character here, right, has basically like captured his kin's lover or girlfriend or something, right, and is holding her hostage against his will, her will.
Oh, good callback there.
This is the, yeah. So you're talking about those standard kind of tropes, and I noticed, yeah, the flow of the first volume of this Berserk follows kind of the same flow, even up to the point of like this image that's so big in Berserk of him climbing up the stairs towards the Griffith character,
right,
and the Griffith being, you can't see it in this image, but Griffith being like the kind of pretty blonde guy versus the dark-haired protagonist. Capes, stairs, short dark hair, long blonde hair.
Yeah, the omnisexual, you know, in this case villain, but you know, essentially paired against each other. Omnisexual beautiful boy design. That's definitely became a sort of standard action trope. I also love the lighting on the upper left-hand panel there, the underlit.
Oh, this? Yeah.
Yeah.
This is really good. So I do think this one looks like it's a pretty clear reproduction.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I had to look at it in print. That looks like a second generation to me.
So what are you seeing? Like you were talking about also seeing these from. Yeah, I guess this stuff looks more filled in.
Yeah. So you can see that there's general amount of fill in and expansion and the fine lines. There's a huge distinction when you see the ones that are from the original negative. You see how fine they got with the hatching in comparison to the thick brushwork.
And there you can see it's even not catching at all.
Right, and that's one of the reasons that I suspect that it's, you know, I don't just suspect, I would be willing to bet that it's from the negative and not necessarily from scans of the original artwork nowadays. Because
of this loss of the finest lines.
Exactly, because from you know, the highest optical resolution scanners nowadays, have the sharpest optical resolution, you would capture those lines even without output sharpening, likely. Whereas the photographic processes, it was a lot more likely that you blow out those fine lines. Yeah, look at that, the tapering on that hatching. It's just really nice. You see that the angle to it, the angle that the pen was held to get those sort of chicken beak lines.
Yeah, but they are thicker. You can see that thicker versus these ones. Yeah.
Yeah, much finer.
Hatching. So this scene here is from that chapter 9 then.
Yep.
And you can see it all like here gets a little gummier. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, the diminished detail in the blacks is the other way that you can tell. So the areas where the hatching is intended to give you a darker tone basically are filling in on all sides, and so you tend to get less of the white detail inside of the darker hatching areas.
You get big mushy spots basically.
Exactly, and it's sort of like middle tone gray to something that was intended to have a lot of value to it.
Yeah. This holds up though, which is why I was a little confused, because a lot of times those big areas just fill in black.
Right. Yeah, I'd be curious if they even knew that the production negative was gone, or whether it was like there was something wrong with the way it was mounted or something, and somebody just replaced it. Which, you know, like somebody at the printer might have just replaced it at some point. Yeah. Whoever was keeping the negative together.
So I scanned a couple other things, not even to look at the production quality or whatever, but just some things I like. This is I really, in the manga, have always loved the big, thick, like you said, big, thick, brushy lines filled in with the tone like this, instead of filling in the black. That's a really common trick. And some of the guys in the 90s, like Todd McFarlane, did that a lot too. Or
super sexy.
Yeah, there's something about that. I don't know what it is, but I've always loved that. I don't know why. You'd think if you'd fill it in with the black, it would be more dynamic, but I think it ramps up the line work in an interesting way.
Right, and some nice tone etching on the background there. You can see that it's got some hatching style etching, and then some sort of using the side of the razor in there to make some larger marks right to the left of the spear there.
Or maybe even some whiteout because there's like some blobs.
Yeah, possibly whiteout, or also possibly just using the essentially like the tip to cut in some for that section, like the side of the tip, like a sort of like a triangular tool.
Yeah.
Kurtzman used that on some of the war comics that he did. He'd use that over the black, use an X-Acto in that fashion to sort of chip away in a triangular fashion at the black ink.
Yeah, it looks cool. It's a cool effect.
Mm-hmm.
And then that runs into this effect that I like, makes it even. That's why that one in particular stood out, because a lot of times you just get this effect here, but then to have it like go into all of that etching is really cool.
Right.
This one, I don't know if your copy has this, but when I was looking at this page, I thought, oh, that digital lettering they did is fuzzy and everything else is sharp. So I scanned it to see what was up. Does yours, you didn't notice that?
No, what page is that? I didn't see that now. That's
I
interesting.
don't know what page it is. But you'll see what it is when I zoom in close. It was very bizarre because it really stood out to me as like, man, that digital lettering. Because throughout the rest of the book, I thought the lettering looked pretty nice. It's on page. It's
Yeah,
early on.
I've got it I've got it open now. I don't have that on my copy.
You know, it doesn't look fuzzy. Okay, so
No.
this is something going on my copy. And at
Weird.
first I saw it just on the lettering, but check this out.
Oh yeah. So that okay, I see. Yeah, this whole plate is was screwed up. So you got a dual impression happening here. So it's like a slippage of the print plate. There's some term for that I'm not remembering.
And it's like a light gray.
Mm-hmm.
And I only saw it applied to the lettering because it's very, very obvious on the lettering.
Yeah.
So I thought, man, that was weird. They put like it almost looked to me like they did the lettering small and then realized, oh shit, I want it bigger, and like enlarged it as a raster file and left it fuzzy. You know, I thought, why would they do that? And then when I scanned it, it was just that. So that's just in the print that I got, but it does apply to the art as well for a little bit. So that's an interesting artifact.
Yeah, that can happen at any time, and it's a miracle that anything gets printed. If you think about how weird the entire process is, it's like, okay, so you got this blanket, and then you got some like metal that resists. I mean, oil on it that resists. Though, I mean, the whole thing is just crazy that it even works.
Yeah, offset lithography.
Mm-hmm.
It is a miracle, and then that it can get like, when this is all filled with water and the ink can only grab that one oiled spot, that it's grabbing that thin.
Right.
It is wild. This one I scanned just because this is another instance of that technique that we were seeing on the sword in Berserk. Except here they're only doing the hashtag. On the Berserk sword, they add a third direction to the line. And then this one, they start adding a third direction down here, but they're also adding the taper. So he's getting a gradient, which I don't think in Berserk they really had a gradient. It's just that it used to create an even gray. So I thought that was cool. And it's another example of, there's a little bit of fill-in going on here. But overall, the print quality is really good. Another way I'm always looking at is the print quality good after working with you is like the attention to the screen tone, and like those look nice and clear. And then going to the cover, I had to because of the neck. I don't know if you know this guy, but the singer for Cannibal Corpse, his name is George Corpse Grinder Fisher, is well known for having a neck thicker than his head. And it immediately came to mind when I saw that. And then to make Corpse Grinder even more terrifying and or likable, he's well known for like winning toys in those machines, and going back to the 80s too, where you go down and you like grab the stuffed animal out of the machine. He loves playing those, and he collects them and then donates them to children's toy funds. So I don't know. I just had to throw that in there because
That's great.
That and or like that dinosaur in Jurassic Park that flares its neck.
Right.
Because the cover is so absurd. So Any, I don't know. That's all I really want to talk about in the book. It's fun. I'll definitely get further volumes of it just for the art. I'll be interested to see how the story develops. Was
Yeah.
there anything else you wanted to talk about it?
Well, I mean, I just thought that it's hugely influential. I mean, it's interesting. You were saying the thing about Street Fighter. You know, you've got a character named Ken, who's a hand-to-hand fighter who fights all these variety of different villains, including somebody who has, I mean, basically looks like M. Bison on page 289.
Yeah.
You know, it's just I think it's hard to overstate
Oh, yeah, totally.
how influential this is, and it's interesting to me. You know, maybe this is one of those things that I'll keep on coming back to over and over again, and people might get sick of it. But people talk about like the comics canon, and it's interesting how limited our perspective is on this stuff, and how much it's influenced by what got translated and what didn't get translated, and when. And you know, I can really imagine something like this causing like a moral panic in the United States
Yeah.
if this had come out in like 1983, you know, at the same time as it was being published, and it was easily available to anybody who wanted to read it. You know, people just be like, "What the hell is this?" You
But I
know.
was aware of it in the 90s at least, and it
Mhm.
quite obviously influenced all of the American art in the 90s. Like those guys had to have at least been seen untranslated versions of it and being like, whoa, you know, like I gotta.
Right. And I don't know enough about Hong Kong action comics, but you know, I don't know which direction the influence goes. But I mean, you know, basically, Hong Kong has had its own comic scene for as you know several decades, and if you ever read any Hong Kong action comics, I mean, this is extremely similar to a lot of those as well, and including this sort of hyper detail and certain aspects of it. You know, this is an interesting kind of, you know, we talk about realism sometimes. This is an interesting kind of realism. Somebody is very aware of how a leather jacket looks and lavishes an hour or 2 hours worth of work on every page where there's a leather jacket, right? But it's not realistic in any sense. Like you've got these very cartoony forms, but then the forms themselves are reproduced in a very like a sophisticated animation sense, you know. It's a
Yeah,
really
well, even the anatomy, like that neck, like that dude
right.
obviously knows what a neck looks like.
Yeah,
There's a lot of points where it's like the Michelangelo or Rodin thing where the hands are over exaggerated.
right.
But yeah, there is a general impression because of the surface rendering, I think, that it's
Uh-huh.
pretty realistic.
Right.
Versus like the Miyazaki or those other rubbery people with the realistic backgrounds.
Right. What the last thing I wanted to bring up is I mentioned it earlier. Even a monkey can draw manga. They have a section at the end of the first collected book. By the way, you can't get this unless you're gonna, you know, pony up $250 or something. I was gonna send this to you in the mail, Carson, and I was like, oh, I guess I'm not.
Yeah.
I can't bring myself to sell it because it's one of the, you know, it's got like one chapter that's about the funniest thing I've ever read. But they have a section where they, after they've completed their training, and they're going to submit their works to magazines, and they come up with a concept, but then the guy says, "Well, we can't actually do the work until we know which magazine we're submitting to." And he's like, "Shonen Jump."
Yeah.
And he says, "Bio Warrior Peach Boy."
Oh, and so, does this book switch styles a lot? We're gonna have to look at this book.
Yeah.
You're just gonna have to scan stuff, and we'll flip through it.
Yeah, no, it switches styles over and over again throughout the entire thing. And so it has a summary: extreme visual technique, including cut-off panels, speed lines, and converging lines. Anything is possible as long as you follow the golden rules of effort, friendship, and victory. Depart from everyday existence. Go a billion light years beyond. Bio Warrior Peach Boy, the blood-drenched destiny. The controversial Bio Demon, Peach, punishment for absolute justice. One of the successes for Shonen Boys magazine lies in the hyper-speed departure from everyday existence in the form of escape and fantasy. For Jump, the panel must be so wide the editors don't even have any room for their gripes. So draw it so big that the editors can't draw on the side of your right on the side of your pages. The lines must be so fast they make the reader dizzy. It's all right to have thousands of bodies explode, as long as the story is one of great trials and tribulations the hero and his followers go through before achieving the final destiny.
Yeah, I mean that's the
A sample story, AD 2000XX, the world destroyed. The remaining survivors fight over scarce food supplies, and the earth has become a wasteland of carnage and fear. One day, an old woman emerges from her shelter to do her laundry in the river. There, she discovers a gigantic peach. My, what a huge peach! Overjoyed, she attempts to take it home when all of a sudden she's attacked by starving Mohawk soldiers.
yeah.
But then,
exactly making fun of it.
Thunder crashes down, and a young man emerges from the split peach. He is the Peach, human cyborg bio-warrior Peach Boy, who has just escaped from the Oshimaga laboratory upstream. I'll spare you the rest, but you know.
I want to read that one though. Yeah. A, I want to read Peach Boy, and B, I'm gonna see if I can find a digital version of that, and then we can read that one and talk about it. That would be great.
Yeah. It's quite good. Anyway, I felt like my destiny was finally being fulfilled, having actually read Fist of the North Star in translation. So,
yeah, I'm like I said, this is something I was aware of. I've seen it all throughout my life, and always thought the art was cool. So, and you know, it's just nice to be able to flip through it in the nice reproduction like that. So we're gonna go now and do. We're going to go try and redraw this one, and I'm going to complain excessively about French curves. And while we're working on that, you all make sure to go pre-order, if you haven't, The Strange Death of Alex Raymond by myself and Dave Sim. Sean Robinson's the publisher, and all of that print stuff that we're talking about. Sean's the dude that's making sure we're reprinting the teeniest, tiniest lines and best screen tones you've ever seen in your life.
Hey, Carson, I've been watching other YouTube videos, and I've learned a few things. So apparently I need to talk much, much faster. So I'm going to talk really fast right now, and I'm going to tell you guys to smash that subscribe button, smash that like button, hit us in the comments.
Yeah.
What else am I missing? I got to pull my shirt down.
I'm too hairy for that. Like, that's just gross. No one wants. Should we do that? We get like all the subscribes and likes, and if we have another video here, go click this.
I'm ready for it.
I just don't think that's me. Even the thumbnails, I'm like, this is too much extra, but it really seems to be helping. So,
well, I'll tell you what, if it's too much for you, we'll have somebody else, a guest, come in specifically to say those things. Ideally, a guest with, some décolletage.
We just need to hire I'll get Jack to do it before he leaves. A 10-year-old that's like, smash that, and then we can just stick it on the end of every video. Maybe that's what we'll do.
There we go. We'll get some guests.
Right. Smash that like and that subscribe. We'll see you for the recreation.
All right.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button.